Howdy, folks. The American West, a vast land of open spaces, rugged individuals, and untamed freedom, is a foundational piece of our national identity. And at the heart of this enduring myth stands one man, the cinematic legend of John Wayne. From his quiet confidence to his unwavering moral compass, Wayne's characters have come to define what it means to be an American hero. But there's a problem with this larger-than-life image. It's a beautifully crafted fantasy, a meticulous illusion forged in Hollywood, that has very little to do with the grim, grueling reality of life on the real frontier. This story, with its clean gunfights and solitary heroes, is a myth that would have gotten John Wayne himself killed. In this video, we'll peel back the layers of this cinematic legend to reveal a hidden truth. We'll explore why a man with John Wayne's strength and principles would have been utterly unprepared for a world where the greatest threats were not outlaws, but invisible diseases and the constant back-breaking struggle for survival. We'll also uncover the true untold stories of the people who actually settled the West, from forgotten African-American and Hispanic cowboys to resilient women and exploited Chinese laborers, whose grit and perseverance were far more heroic than any Hollywood script. By the end, you'll see the American frontier not as a stage for a lone hero's triumph, but as a rich, diverse, and complicated story of collective struggle and survival. The character of John Wayne was not born in the wild plains of Texas or the dusty trails of Arizona. He was a carefully constructed invention, modeled on a silent film star and refined by legendary director John Ford. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing more than 220 pounds at his peak, his sheer size was a central part of his on-screen persona, underscoring his physical dominance. The Wayne hero was designed to be an unflappable, indestructible figure with a clear sense of right and wrong, a solitary defender of truth, justice, and the American way. He was the ultimate individualist, a lone wolf in conflict with the ties of family and society, who could defeat the bad guys and emerge triumphant on his own. But this fantasy crumbles when you compare it to the unforgiving reality of the 19th century American frontier. The life of a real cowboy was a far cry from the glamorous image on screen. It was a low-grade, constant grind of physical and mental hardship that no amount of moral strength or physical bravado could conquer alone. Their days started before dawn and often ended long after dark, filled with back-breaking labor like butchering animals, cutting wood, and repairing fences, all while battling the relentless elements. The romantic idea of living off the land was a Hollywood fiction. Real frontiersmen subsisted on a monotonous diet of dried beans, salted bacon, and coffee. Even with government aid like the Homestead Act, land was often too dry to farm, and necessities like water and fuel were scarce. The working cowboy's pay was low, and any hard-earned money was often spent quickly. John Wayne's rugged individualism, which glorifies upward mobility and monetary success, would have been completely out of place in a world of subsistence farming and economic precarity. The most brutal contradiction to the John Wayne myth is the reality of health and hygiene on the frontier. His characters were indefatigable and indestructible, but a real-life Westerner's greatest enemy was often invisible. People faced a long list of deadly diseases, including cholera, malaria, typhoid, smallpox, and tuberculosis, which was often called consumption or wasting sickness. Even the constant dust of the plains was a serious health threat, causing chronic respiratory problems known as dust lung. Medical care was virtually non-existent, and many people were forced to rely on snake oil salesmen peddling so-called cure-alls that were mostly just alcohol and opium. The sheer number of horrifying maladies, from bilious fever, which was a form of typhoid, to canine madness, which was rabies, shows that the greatest threat on the frontier was not an outlaw with a gun, but a microscopic pathogen or a simple lack of clean water. The legendary hero who could shake off a bullet wound would have been utterly defenseless against these silent, unseen killers. Howdy, partner. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the real West, please be sure to tap that like button and hit subscribe. It really helps the channel out and brings these hidden stories to more folks like you. The romanticized image of the stoic, quick-drawn lawman who tames the Wild West is also pure Hollywood fantasy. The famous high noon duel was a cinematic fabrication. Shootouts were rare, messy, and spur-of-the-moment events born of anger, not ritualized showdowns. The gunfight at the OK Corral, often shown as a clean, virtuous gun battle, was a chaotic and confusing event that lasted less than a minute. The job of a real sheriff was not primarily about gunfights. It was an administrative position focused on collecting property taxes and maintaining court security. Many real lawmen had complex and dark pasts, and some were even outlaws themselves, who used their position to steal and extort from the very people they were meant to protect. The clear line between a lawman and an outlaw was often blurred. A mythical hero whose singular purpose is to defeat the villain would be ill-equipped for the desk and PR job that was often the reality of the role. Perhaps the greatest lie of the John Wayne archetype is that it serves as a tool of historical erasure. The on-screen myth presents a West that is overwhelmingly white and male, conveniently leaving out the rich, diverse, and complex tapestry of the individuals who truly shaped the American frontier. The story of the lone white hero conquering an empty wilderness is a profound lie. It dismisses the collective struggles and contributions of countless others. For example, the romanticized image of the cowboy as a white man ignores the fact that as many as 1 in 4 cowhands in Texas were black. In fact, the very word cowboy is an anglicization of the Spanish word vaquero, from whom the American cowboy tradition evolved. For many newly freed black Americans, the West offered a path to escape the racial discrimination of the South and find a sense of freedom and opportunity, creating a legacy that still exists today. The Hollywood myth also misrepresents the role of women. In reality, they were not just prim school teachers or saloon prostitutes. Women were homesteaders who claimed land in their own names, business owners, bounty hunters, and even outlaws. Their lives were defined by their essential contributions to the survival of the frontier community. Furthermore, the narrative of heroic conquest dismisses the brutal history of violence, genocide, and dispossession endured by Native Americans. It also ignores the vital contributions of exploited laborers, such as the thousands of Chinese immigrants who built the Transcontinental Railroad. They faced extreme prejudice and dangerous working conditions, yet their efforts connected the country and laid the foundation for future prosperity. Their story was intentionally omitted from the heroic narrative. The myth of the American West was not a natural outgrowth of history. It was a fantasy intentionally manufactured by a series of cultural forces. The blueprint for the Western hero came from dime novels of the late 19th century, which were largely written by East Coast writers who were completely clueless about the realities of the West. This literary fantasy was then brought to life by William Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West shows, which cemented romanticized stereotypes in the public's imagination. This myth served a crucial psychological role for a rapidly changing nation. As the country became more industrial and urban, the image of the rugged, self-reliant cowboy became a powerful antidote to the anxieties of a new, complex, and seemingly soft industrial world. The fantasy of the strenuous life in a wide-open land offered an escape from the confining realities of factory and office work. The myth's power lies not in its historical accuracy, but in its ability to satisfy a profound cultural need for identity and purpose. The cinematic hero personified by John Wayne would not have survived the real Wild West. His virtues would have been liabilities in a world defined by disease, relentless labor, economic precarity, and the quiet, unglamorous struggle for survival. But the myth persists because it fulfills a deep cultural need for a story of clear morality and righteous victory. However, by moving beyond this sanitized fantasy, we can uncover a history that is not only more accurate, but also more compelling. The true stories of resilience, community, and the diverse individuals who genuinely shaped the American West offer a narrative that is richer, more complex, and ultimately more heroic than any Hollywood fabrication. Well now, folks, by embracing this more honest history, we can celebrate the real grit and perseverance of the people who survived and thrived on the frontier. It's a story of collective triumph that is far more valuable than the myth of a lone hero's conquest, and it makes you wonder, what other parts of our history are still clouded by a beautiful lie?